your channel hasn't really bumped up to that level. Now, if one of your pets goes behind you and does something crazy, I mean, it really could raise the level. Oh, it's going a little slower than usual. Okay, there we go. Right. Oh, there we go. Set that my volume was off. There we go. And let me go back to here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started then with our first meeting, or our meeting for the fiscal year 2021 allocations for the Mental Health Tax Board. I put before you a, you can see our agenda for today, the virtual meeting requirements, as I mentioned before, because we are not doing let me just, so I can see you all here too. Since we are not doing an in-person meeting due to COVID-19, our requirements are that we have broadcast this on YouTube, as I mentioned before, and then also we have let any of the media outlets or anybody who wishes to receive notice of our meetings with the county who has a notice on file, they were made aware of that meeting. And I'll go ahead and just, if we can do, I'll share our, just quickly. Just for the record, I'll go ahead and read our public meeting notice. The Boone County, I put the aging one in, I apologize. It's the Mental Health Tax Board Committee. We'll meet on Thursday, May 7th at 3 p.m. via video teleconference. The meeting format is necessitated due to the state of emergency regarding threats to public health presented by the novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting may be attended by the public by viewing the video teleconference via YouTube at www.youtube.com/UCG10FGAP4MKJGOLJETOA. The meeting will be posted in advance of the agenda will be posted in advance of the meeting, and residents may submit a question or comment regarding any item to the Human Services Director no later than Monday, May 4th, 2020 at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So that is the notice that was made aware for everybody. Jumping back here to our agenda. Too many clicks, sorry. So wanted to just give you kind of a review where we are with fiscal year 20 and what's gone on so far. So the year had gone pretty smoothly. We hadn't had a lot of big shakeups or anything. We were moving pretty well. Once the Boone County Schools announced their closure, we realized pretty quickly that the organizations were going to be dramatically impacted by COVID-19, particularly those that were offering school services, and then quickly again realized later that nearly every organization was. Now, I'll caveat that by saying about half of them probably are, since especially in the mental health category, about 50% of our programs are kind of the safety net type of programs. They were not necessarily impacted by their ability to provide the service, but were instead impacted because they have seen an increase in demand. For the organizations that were negatively impacted by closures, and you can think about things like the YLD program that Brighton Center does in the schools, Catholic Charities and Family Nurturing Center, the counseling programs that they do in the school programs, the Kids on the Block for Family Nurturing Center. For other groups, the ID groups, adult daycare, senior services, the anything where you can have congregations of people together that were negatively impacted. Together with Kenton and Campbell County, we reached an agreement that we would allow organizations to do an alternate billing practice. So traditionally, all these funds that are allocated are always released on a reimbursement-based practice, meaning that after the month is completed, they submit an invoice to us that shows how many units they provided that month, and we reimburse them based on those costs that are set up through the application and the contract. For those that have closed, for those that were impacted by the COVID-19 closures, they were able to submit to us an alternate operation plan, which would had a wide breadth of opportunities. So it could be anything from not being able to provide the services, doing telehealth services or remote virtual services to check in. So whatever they were doing, how they were doing it. And then they could bill us at an average of what they had been billing us monthly for fiscal year 20. So some organizations, so some of the ID groups in particular, they were able to operate through most of the month of March. So they just billed us what they actually provided. But for those organizations who weren't, they were able to take a look back between July 1 and really February, the end of February, and say, we billed X amount each month, so it was averaged out at this much, and we would like to bill you for these last few months in the quarter for that amount up into the total allocation. They couldn't exceed that allocation, but the proof that they would have to provide to us besides that plan, they'd also have to provide us proof that they're continuing to pay their staff. So they're still getting the funding in, but then we want to make sure that those staff persons are still getting paid, even if they're not able to provide those services. So that was really well accepted. It brought a lot of relief to a lot of organizations, and we're still working through the processes a little bit, what counts as payroll proof and things like that. But I think it was a good allowance to put out there. So any questions about that? We don't know what this is going to look like. Obviously, I think that probably group settings are probably going to still be impacted after July 1 potentially, and probably again in the fall, what we're hearing about what relapses would happen, especially for those aging things. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. It was a little bit of an easier decision to make because we had basically worked through most of the fiscal year. And so we had a nice trend about what the services were up until this point and could average that out. But we haven't made any decisions beyond June 30th if this program would continue, this allocation would continue. So that's that piece. And I'll jump right into our capital projects update. So as you know, we had a pilot project for capital funds this year. And Lana was our mental health representative. So thank you very much, Lana. I'll stop the sharing real quick. We are excited that we're going to be able to operate this program again this year as well. Originally, when we submitted the application before COVID, we had a little bit of a bump in there. We thought maybe we could allocate up to $450,000, but looking at what's there, we decided to kind of keep it flat. We don't want to increase that budget, not really knowing what revenues are going to do. But so we anticipate that we still will be able to pull down some of those reserves up to about $350,000. I wanted to just show you a little bit about what was funded and how that worked. And because we'll be asking either Dee or you, Carolyn, one of the two of you guys to help participate probably this year as we work through it. So I'm not going to go through this I'm not going to do the whole presentation here, but I wanted to share this with you all, what this happened. So there we go. So as you remember, the funds were released in an RFP in July. We had worked out the parameters of it. They had to be located within Boone County. It had to be preference was given to organizations that were already funded by the payroll taxes, and it could be used for a set number of capital projects. So the first, we had 5 applications, and the recommendation was to do at least a portion of all of them. The first project was for the Brighton Center, the Shelby Street location. You can see the repairs that were recommended with the allocation for $30,355. The next program was New Day Ranch. That was one of our newer programs for mental health they do the equine therapy with Boone County Schools and Walton Bruno Schools. Their request was, they had a 3-part request for a pole barn classroom to be built, purchase of a 15-passenger van and some fuel for the van. And they also asked for additional funds for a property purchase. The board recommended that these 2 projects, as you can see here, they did not recommend the property purchase. And I can let you know, Lana, that they did find a volunteer who donated the funds to purchase that property. So they're going to build a caretaker's home on that plot to help take care of the animals at the barn. But they are not going to be using the funds for the 15-passenger van because I guess once they did a further research, the insurance cost for transporting Boone County students and children was too much. So it's beyond what they could do. So that's disappointing, which they would have done that research in advance. But as with all of this, it's all reimbursement based. So they don't use it. It doesn't go to them. It stays in our pot to use in the future. This was an exciting project. I think the Community Action Commission really went outside of their typical and created something really brand new. It was they sought funds to develop an app, a smartphone app, and then to purchase a van so they could transport individuals to jobs within the county. And so the idea is to sort of run a much smaller public transportation service into local jobs. So the advantage of having the van versus riding the bus is that they're a little more flexible. They can take folks right to the door rather than doing it at a bus stop, which might entail a long walk, which might be kind of prohibitive for somebody who has some ambulatory issues. So they have started this project. I know they've done some transportation with this. I haven't actually seen it in action, but I'm looking forward to getting to look at that, see that soon. Panorama Plus was a project that we don't typically fund. They asked for funds for, you can see the little over $48,000 for various property repairs at their senior living high-rise in Florence, kind of close to the border of Union and Florence. The board recommended doing a partial allocation, some HVAC equipment and window replacement, and they were very thankful for that. And then finally, Redwood School, you may be familiar with them. They receive funding from the tax board, the ID tax board usually, and they are this year again. They were looking to expand into Boone County. So their total request, as you can see, was $124,000. The recommendation was for $38,000, and it was for some very specific points of the expansion project. I got an update from them just last week that we were told, and they were in the process, actually the executive director made an announcement at the fiscal court that they were going to be purchasing the Women's Crisis Center building on 236. Oh my gosh, I haven't been in Boone County long enough. And so they're going to purchase that building. But they have decided to hold off on that closing until after June, just to see what happens if they're going to continue to expand or not. Lana, you might remember we had some questions about how quickly they were going to be able to get this project up and going anyway. They had a very tight time frame, I think, where they were going to be operating July 1, which they also applied for some funds through the Boone County Early Childhood Fund. And everybody who looked at that kind of thought, that is a really tight turnaround to find a location, build it out, or whatever renovations need to happen. And then recruit families and make it get it certified by the state as needed to operate. So we'll see if that continues to happen this year or not. So those were the programs that were funded. Any questions about that capital project at all? You guys are so quiet. We're going to go through this like that. So our going back to our agenda, the next thing that we have to do is to discuss the allocations. So I will share now what the tax board allocation recommendations are from our department. You'll use this very much, but there's only so many little tiles that show up on the ability, so I need to go back and click on the other one so that it shows up. So we're all familiar with this document, right? Looks very similar. I know we use a lot of Excel. So what we might recommend doing is you can, just as a brief reminder, let me move my guys over here again. The agencies are listed here. These are the programs. You can see we added some. I think, Dana, did you do this part or did Alan do the additional colors?
I think that I did that part. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while.
It's been great to have Dana on board, and we work closely with Kenton and Campbell County. So they, Dana helped and Campbell County helped pull a lot of all the information over. So We have here the fiscal year 21 request, which is what we're discussing today. This is what you'll see in this column, our current recommendations, and these will change it with your input. This is our fiscal year 20 funding. I'm sorry, and I did not include the mid-year increases on here, but I can do that as we go through. I apologize, I didn't update that piece. And then we also have the current fiscal year 20 allocations for Kenton and Campbell. I don't have their finalized numbers yet. They haven't been approved for fiscal year 21, but you can see what they're doing, what they did last year. So if it's okay with you, we'll just go down by order. I'll try to group them together if we have a couple that are similar in function. Right off the bat, I want to tell you that you might remember that last year we had 2 organizations that had typically been funded that forgot to submit an application. So we have not funded them this year. Family Promise, which is a homeless shelter provider for families, and Holly Hill. They do the residential treatment for girls, and they also do, which we haven't funded we do fund the, we have funded the supervised visitation for parents who have had children removed from their homes and require somebody to supervise the visitation. The other piece is that we had one organization that again forgot the application, and that organization transitions. I don't know why, I don't know how, but they forgot.
They forgot it for this year?
Yes.
Was there something with the emergency shelter from last year? Am I remembering this right?
That was a couple of years ago, and they were late, and we had one other one that was late, and we made and that was kind of our last line in the sand. This was about 3 or 4 years ago, that we'll accept them this time, but anything after January 15th deadline, we're not going to accept, just because for the transparency and the fairness sake. So they made theirs in on time.
No, good.
So, I will tell you one more thing, and then I meant to add this to our agenda formally, but I don't know if many of you have seen, there was a lot in the paper about the city of Florence and the homeless issue that happened. I can tell you we've had a lot of conversations with the city of Florence. Actually, the last year we've created a task force to look at the homelessness issue in Boone County, and the city of Florence has been a partner at the table and have been great about it. Following the kind of conflict that happened when there was a plan made to move individuals who'd been sheltered at the convention center to a hotel in Florence without any input from the city or the county. We had been having conversations about what kind of interventions might need to be had for unsheltered individuals in Boone County. And Welcomes House has been our great partner in outreach services. They had been really intricately involved in the convention center. And when they finally did move to a hotel, they are still operating that. The county, with input from Brighton Center and Welcome House and Mary Rose, created a plan for responding to unsheltered individuals, a segment of which was to continue to refer to shelters that were open and accepting available. So that's Welcome House and Brighton Center primarily, so women and children. The next factor was to provide hotels for individuals who were unsheltered, who were interested and wanted to go. So they secured a hotel in Hebron to provide that service. And this third factor was to make sure that anybody who was still living in an encampment had access to sanitary, hand washing, and toileting facilities. With everything being closed, accessing those items was really difficult. The libraries are closed. Florence Christian wasn't offering their shower and laundry services. So how do you both provide those services to prevent the transmission of, because they're needed, those are functions that are needed as being a human, but also to decrease or mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 should it enter into that population. One, because they can be particularly vulnerable to it due to underlying health conditions. And then two, due to the transitory nature of somebody who's homeless, if they're walking throughout the community, they can help to spread that at a greater rate. So it's been a great project so far. Welcome House has stepped up and done a fantastic job with that. They've pulled in a lot of partners, just as they have at the other location, including Brighton Center, Fairhaven. I won't list them all because I'm going to miss them, but it's been a great project, but I wanted to share that piece of information with you all.
So real quick, because I heard about this and was getting feedback from other people. So with the emergency shelter and that group there, they had originally put their folks at the convention center, correct?
Yes.
And then, so are they working with Welcome House on it, or like how, I got so confused. And then there was like a group from Ohio that came in, which I didn't understand that either. So
So
very confusing.
yeah, I can imagine if you weren't paying, if you didn't know what these groups are, I can see that there were, in March, there were 2 groups from Ohio. So you probably have heard of Maslow's Army. They
Yeah.
like to get a lot of press coverage and things, and they're very kind of grassroots organization, and that have a mixed reputation for working with established organizations. And then Shelter House, which is one of the larger homeless sheltering providers in Cincinnati, that both took up hotel space in the city of Florence for sheltered individuals without talking to the city. So that happened. And it wasn't being very well managed. It wasn't being very well communicated. And technically it happened after both DeWine and Bashir issued orders that you shouldn't be crossing state lines. After that, so that happened. And so there's a lot of bad blood concern about what's going on. The decision came, it was sort of like a simultaneous thing. Like they moved in on a weekend, and then like by Monday or Tuesday, there was a decision made to move the folks from the convention center, which Welcome House was a partner in with Emergency Shelter and a lot of other places, to move those folks to a hotel in Florence that they had been working with families for a while. Unfortunately, like I said, there hadn't been a lot of communication with the city of Florence about it and what to do. I mean, honestly, I said to them, if you would have talked to us, we could have told you that this would be a bad idea because of these other 2 groups and how it's not going well. But so that group, the convention center group, found a place in a Campbell County hotel. So, and they've been doing really well since there. They've been hoteling about 40 people there. We have about 31 right now in Boone, and it's been going up and down a little bit. They have pretty strict standards about what you can and cannot do. I think her last update was something along the lines of that the stimulus check came in, and some folks had some additional monies and got some things that they're not really allowed to do under this program. So they've been exited from it. But otherwise, it's just a whole different program. For the most part, our Boone County folks haven't had a lot of interventions like this. Like the folks who were in Covington at the convention center might have had more interactions with those shelters than what our folks have had, and at least recently. So that's kind of the background for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the update, because I was, on social media, it was a variety of one side versus the other, and it was confusing. And somebody asked me about it in relation to this board, and I wanted to be able to have, something solid to respond.
Yeah, and I can tell you that the city of Florence came back to the discussion as we created this plan about what was going to happen to take care of the unsheltered during the crisis. They came to the table and were participating in it and working with it through us. So it was just maybe a little bit about the process and the conversation that needed to happen and that hadn't happened beforehand. I can tell you too that we're all learning a bunch of this stuff. So if we can all write this stuff down for the next 100-year pandemic, we'll do a lot better next time around, hopefully. But there wasn't a whole lot of planning in place for this population. So we can already see that what we need to do is we talk with our emergency management folks are awesome, and our administration's been awesome. So I think we'll have some better interventions in place for the next time that a large scale emergency plan needs to be deployed, which hopefully isn't for a long time.
Yeah.
And we'll write it down since none of us will be here by then.
Yep.
So long. But if you ever have any other questions about that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to fill you in about what we're doing, and because we appreciate what you guys are doing. Okay, so we'll go through and work through the process a little bit. I also have a copy. Dana created a spreadsheet of our utilization rates. And if you ever get tired of hearing me talking at all, just start talking and listen to what you have to say instead. So our first program is Boone County CASA. This has been a long funded organization. You can see that their request here is for a little over, it's almost $71,000. The current funding is at $66,000. I want to pull up just again. Sorry, I have to pull it up to the top again. These are our utilization rates. You can see that they are pretty much right on target for the current fiscal year through March. They're about 75% way of the funds through. So we feel like that funding at 66,000 or at 65,000 is probably a good rate, being 75% through the fiscal year. And that's our recommendation. They have done some expansion into Gallatin County at the request of the court system. And so as they continue to do that and grow with that, we anticipate that their requests should be reducing somewhat, even if their numbers aren't quite as high. We shouldn't be covering all that admin cost because there's non-Boone County residents that are getting that benefit. Any questions or? No. Okay, Boone County Jail. This has been one of our best buys for the money for the longest time. The number hasn't increased. This is allowing all the access to counseling and crisis intervention through a contractor with the Boone County Jail. Our recommendation is to keep the funding flat there. Okay. And I'll move down and then we can stop after if you guys have any questions or working through it. The next program, the next agency is Brighton Center. I do still run the board, but since Dana's only been with us since December, and then she took some days off for the holiday, and then she took some days off for the COVID. Just kidding. I'll go through it with you all. We were able to do a monitoring with them just before the, actually I think in February, is that when it was, Dana?
Yeah, it was in February.
And which went really well. We still think that their programs are doing really well. They are one of the results of the recession that happened in 2008 was the creation of the Safety Net Alliance in Northern Kentucky, and Brighton Center is the one who receives the funds to help operate that. So it's really a consortium of 200 different entities in Northern Kentucky that provide safety net services and when they can have discussion. And they have increased their meetings. They're meeting once a week on Wednesdays and going over a variety of different topics. So they've done a great job with that. We can see that, for a long time, we were backing down off the financial services program. This is really that the mortgage assistance and the foreclosure prevention programming. It's expanded into some other things like just understanding how to budget. Obviously, with what's going on right now, I think this is going to be a really in-demand service. Homeward Bound Shelter is the shelter for youth ages 8 to 17. Maybe it's 10 to 17. Sorry, let me pull that real quick. That they have in Covington. They've had some challenges with the shelter, just and how it works. All of our residential homes, you're going to see a little bit the same reporting as to. It depends on what the state does and what the philosophy they are. Sometimes with residential treatment, they're really interested in using organizations to provide the sheltering services, the housing services, and that's what portion of the Homeward Bound is. And sometimes they really swing much more toward the foster care end. So it just kind of depends on where we are on that spectrum as to what the referral rates are for the kids who get that. And I don't have it on here. I think it's 10. 8 sounds too young. But that program has gone well. The emergency assistance program under 60. This is the first time. Fiscal year 20 was the first time that we funded this program that per your recommendation. And it got off to a rocky start. They were looking to staff it. They were going to use the cost to help staff somebody full time within the county to provide services through a Vista person, but that never really worked out and really fell through. Right before we were, when we met with them, probably in January, we had a conversation about what's going on with that program. And they had decided to really shift it to use it more to just do direct assistance. So to use those funds directly as assistance to individuals. And they were assigning a bilingual staff person to do it within the county. So all of it, what we do for them, they do it on top of what other funding they're adding into it. So that was how they were going to use that process. And they did switch a little bit of their financial services money over to the emergency assistance emergency assistance program once COVID hit, so they could get additional funds out into the community as needed. The YLD program is kind of if you think about it, sort of a mentoring type program. This is a program that they've offered for a long time in Campbell County schools and Newport schools in particular, it's for middle school age children. And we saw how effective it was. And this is about the time we were also reaching out to Mentoring Plus to ask them to come into Boone County and provide services rather than trying to ship our kids to Newport to get the access to them. Brighton Center agreed to come. They are in 2 schools currently. They operate a little differently than they do in Newport. Rather than being an after-school program, the schools that they're in, Ackerman and R.A. Jones, they incorporate them into the school day to try to increase access to this program. So they get different programming, youth leadership development programming, which is a nationally ranked program. It's an accredited program into the schools. So the schools have really liked it. Some schools are actually looking to see if they can increase. I think, let's say Yale maybe asked if they could get it into their program, but we're not expanding it. This would be just to continue in the same 2 schools that they've been in. So the recommendation is basically flat funding for the most part, giving some additional funding to the emergency assistance because it's going to be directly assisted into the community. Any questions about that? All right, we'll move right along. We'll get you out of here real quick. The next program is Catholic Charities. We have funded historically 2 programs with this group, parenting education and school-based counseling. The parenting education program, you'll remember we really looked at these very closely last year between Catholic Charities and Family Nurturing Center and CareNet. And the quality between the 3 programs, the Catholic Charities and the Family Nurturing Center programming was really a much more professional program, we felt it was a much better investment of the funds. So last year, the recommendation was not to fund CareNet, which you agreed. We still find that the program is operating really well. You'll see that their request is a little bit higher this year than it was last year. We think that splitting it somewhere in the middle is probably a better, and I'll pull up that utilization rate again. A better recommendation. They were through their funds mostly through March, but rather than doing a large jump, doing a moderate jump potentially with their funding. The school counseling, when you're looking at this is they mostly do an even bill. They do bill us per client, but I think keeping that 40,000 is probably safe. You'll also remember that when 2 years ago, when after we met, we received notice from Catholic Charities that they were pulling out from all but 2 of the schools. They had been in 5 schools previously, and they were pulling out from everything because they couldn't find staffing to do it. This was in May for the next year. So that's when we went out and talked to the schools and said, what do you think? And that's when we found New Day Ranch. My inclination is to keep the funding flat for this organization, and they make up the difference within their own programming. So that would be their request is 47. My recommendation is to keep it at 40,000, just even get rid of that 500, but up that parenting education a little bit to the 10,000. Any questions? All right, move on. DCCH. No, I don't even have Campbell County Schools view on here. I apologize. I think it was hidden. We did get a small request from Campbell County Schools view, which I don't have on here. Our recommendation is not to fund it. It is their adult education services associated with the schools, so the GED programming. We don't fund Boone County's GED program. I don't recommend we fund Campbell County's either, but if you're really interested in it, we can. Oh, you know what else is missing on here? Hold on.
Is it the children's home, Laura?
Our friend, yeah, let me
Yeah.
stop this share for just 1 minute. I'm sorry, let me fix this. Okay, well, it's not in there. I'm having a hard time finding that on there. So I will tell you verbally about Children's Home of Northern Kentucky. You all should have received the application in front of you. I can't believe I missed that. Mr. Worth's this is our other tab that we use, which includes executive director compensation for organizations that are funded versus their total budget operating expense. And oh, it's actually not in here, so I shouldn't. I haven't used that one too much. I'm sorry. I'm a little behind the ball with that. If you look on the application, though, you'll see that his salary has increased to $366,000 annually. I think, and I believe it's even a little bit more than that when you look at the their 990. Some of it's based upon retirement, but they are unabashedly proud of this number, and they don't have any concern with funding anybody this amount of money for their payroll, despite the fact they're about a $11 million organization. I just don't think that we can allocate taxpayer funds. That's our recommendation.
You know how I feel about this. I mean, I've been pretty, upfront about it.
Ditto for me.
Yeah. I mean, I just can't even.
Well, considering the Diocesan Catholic Children's Home, their budgets are very similar, and their executive director is making like $140,000.
Yeah.
Whereas his was like 366. That's just not right for us to fund them. If that's what they want to do, then that's fine. But I don't think we need to be a part of that.
I agree.
I agree with both of you.
Especially my issue with it, I mean, the budget's unbelievable, which I know that they provide a lot of great services, but literally they're listing 32 Boone County people, right? It's like, how can they, I just don't understand. $75,000 for 32 people.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, and somebody that's making that amount of money is I just can't even believe that they can put it on paper in a, human services grant application.
So I have to show you one more thing, and this is maybe me, Dana's been with me since December, so she knows that I get a little amped up about some things. I had to, I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared to share this, but here we go. Oh, you can't see it. Hold on, sorry, let me share again. Once I saw that the number had gone up, then I was thinking, well, let's go ahead and look at the annual appeal and see their annual report and see where he's at. And I started, with the $366,000, I thought he's probably giving quite a bit of money to the Children's Home in Northern Kentucky. And so made it through, but not at the 50,000 mark, wasn't in the 10,000 group, wasn't at the 1,000 plus group. But if you get down here to the 500 plus, right here, so somewhere between $500 and $1,000 is Mr. Worth and his partner.
That's just insane. I'm sorry. Shame on them.
I don't understand it. So I'm very comfortable with your decision, and I will take that to the fiscal court. I can tell you, I think that the fiscal court feels the same way.
How can they, after the fact that for 2 years we've given them nothing, and then they still come back and ask for $75,000? You would think that they would be like, well, why aren't you I just don't get it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some arrogance there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they have a very impressive donor list, but seriously.
That was my cattiness. I think that came through, and I finally had to share it with well, here's his salary. Here's his retirement benefits. And here's how much he gave back to the organization. So he gave between $500 and $1,000, and he's asking the county to do $75,000. We ask. That's part of the reason.
We could say something like, we'll match your donation. We will match your $500, man.
Right.
Okay, well, here, we'll go back to this then. Shake it off. So DCCH then, you're very familiar with DCCH, their residential treatment program. We had some problem with them a little bit last year. I think I shared with you all with some of their billing. There was quite a few mistakes that had been made and kind of on an ongoing basis. I really was shocked to see this increase here, this request amount, and not for just DCCH, but when I was looking a little more closely at what that cause was there, it's largely related to their unit rate increase. It basically triples. Well, it's about 2.5 times more than what their unit cost is. And looking at the different reasons behind that, I was. And what we became aware of more, and we find more things and more things to ways to examine all these applications year to year, but realized that they didn't have any funds included in their application, any kind of general revenue funds. So no fundraising, no general grants. And so when that happens, we kind of go back to the organization and say, we notice this isn't here. Where are you allocating your funds to? These general funds. And partially it's to be equitable. We had a long conversation with Faith Community Pharmacy this year, which operates basically two programs, one for over 60 and one for under 60. And his kind of complaint was, well, every dollar that I fundraise, I can't kind of hide it somewhere else. I have to use it for this program. I can't shuffle it away under anything else. And I think that's a legitimate point. But my expectation is that, and I think our expectation is that any organization is going to be giving us a fair share of their funds for these programs. We've always taken the stance that our dollars are the last dollars in, and that we don't want to be paying for something that isn't going to directly to a Boone County resident. So I asked them to review that. I have not gotten back from them, from their person. But I also was looking at their application and their development fund, their cost for their program development, and I can pull it up. I didn't do that yet, but I can do that. So to show you where two of my questions came from. And I feel like I just want to offer this explanation because our recommendation is so much less than what their request is. And so to share this. So this is their application, which you all should have a copy of. If we go down, so you'll see here the revenues that they list are State of Kentucky and United Way. So they don't, and that United Way is their direct funding. So they're not listing any of their fundraisers that they do, any other general grants that they might get, or some one-off grants, sometimes like that they might get, or that they think that they'll get. But when I looked down at their fundraising cost was $400,000, which felt really, really high for this organization. And so I looked in their 990, and their 990 only lists about $45,000 worth of funds generated from fundraising. So that proportion seemed very off. So I haven't gotten a full answer about why those numbers are so disproportionate. And then when I asked, Carolyn, you might be familiar with John Ross there. When I asked him about it, he said, no, I know for a fact I've raised $800,000 annually. Well, if you're raising $800,000, which also seems like a lot, $800,000, why aren't we seeing some of those funds into this program, the unit cost here? So those were some of my questions that still have not been resolved, but especially when you see a change in the unit cost here. Our current unit cost for the DCCH is around $51 a night. So
it's almost like, okay, it's been a while since I've been involved with their stuff, but so they're saying their revenue for residential is State of Kentucky and United Way. They aren't putting any of their fundraising funds towards the residential. So they probably have put that in a different bucket, but yet then they're claiming, and I assume that probably some of the fundraising costs is probably the salaries of their development people. I would assume. So yeah, that they can't work it both ways. That's just not gonna fly. We're not stupid girls. So,
yeah,
I
agree. It's a great point. And I remember, and it's been a while since toward them, but I think they had quite a large development staff, even for the size of the organization they were at the time, like 3 or 4 people maybe. Does that sound
Yeah.
right?
Last I mean, when I was, when I chaired the board, they only had 1 and
Okay.
a half at the time, but that was, oh my gosh, that was like probably, well, it's be close to 10 years now.
Okay. So maybe it was closer to that. I just remembered it's been a while. Kirk was still around, but I felt like it was a large number for the.
It is I want to say it is a large number too, and I don't know why.
Okay. So looking at that, we can still work through these numbers with them as far as understanding what the actual unit cost is. I think we can still do that even after you've met, but my sense is that their numbers that they're going to provide haven't dramatically changed, and they're not really seeing he says there's a decline in the census, but they're still seeing folks for about the same range. These are boys and girls, as you see, say ages 6 to 14. They're staying for a longer period of time, but it's about the same as what they anticipate this year. So what's really changed is that unit cost, and I think that's something that we can look into over the next couple of months as we work up their contract. But our recommendation would be to keep it sort of close to where they are. If you now pull up again, one more thing here. Pull up that utilization rate too. This is that utilization rate again. You'll see they're not quite even to that 75% way through March. So, but again, this is at a unit rate that is much lower than what their current proposed unit rate is for fiscal year 21. So I think that if we can work it back to figure out why that's so different, we would be in a better place with them.
So you're proposing to do 40,000 for the year?
Yeah, that would be
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
So, any other thoughts? I mean, this is one really dramatic difference. So anything that you all any concerns, we could definitely discuss it. Okay, we'll move along to emergency shelter. They're finally getting a new home. Courtesy of the Kenton County Fiscal Court, purchased a new building for them. They've been a long time in transition, and what their facility had a lot of, I think they kind of reached the peak of kind of back and forth with the city of Covington over the last year or so. Their requests have kind of decreased. You may have seen a report that came out through a group led by Candace McGraw that I sat on behalf of Boone County, and it tried to look at it took a year's worth of data from all of the agencies who provide homeless services to try to figure out where everybody came from. And a large portion of the folks that are being serviced in Northern Kentucky are coming from, it's Covington and then Ohio are really the biggest portion of them. Now, that's not to say that there aren't from other areas in Northern Kentucky. Boone County certainly has our population. Campbell County certainly has theirs. And they come from everywhere from Fort Mitchell to Walton to every location. But the majority of them are coming from those locations. I think that part of the difference here in the cost or the request, the reduction there is, I think that they still don't see a whole lot of Boone County in that location. I think the majority of the folks that they're servicing at the emergency shelter are Covington and Hamilton County folks. They do see some Boone County, just it's not a whole lot of them. So our recommendation is to continue to fund this shelter at their request. We're rounding it up a little bit to make it even. But to not fund their outreach or their residential housing, which is that their summer program. The street outreach program is their shower and laundry. We just don't have a good name for it within our system. We need to change that. And then the residential housing is their summer recovery program, which they do they're changing it this summer to a 60-day stay. They just launched it again to 5 individuals. But it's such a small amount. I don't know that it's something that we're recommending funding. Certainly it's up to you all if you would be interested in doing so.
So it's only 5 people?
I think usually it's around 12, but
Okay.
due to COVID, they're spacing them out to 5 so far. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's really small. The idea is that they work with them a little bit more intensely. The folks have a bed and try to get them jobs and housing. And so that it's just a different type of emergency sheltering.
It's interesting. I know that this doesn't really answer the question, and it's another question, but it seems like to me, like, doesn't Brighton Center and like Welcome House, I mean, aren't they all doing kind of the same stuff? I mean, you know,
With the exception that there's no sheltering involved with it. Yeah, the Welcome House, Brighton Center, definitely doing case management, doing Welcome House in particular for the unsheltered population, all those wraparound kind of services. And not that the emergency shelter isn't a needed service, but I do sometimes wonder that they maybe are trying to reach a little bit more than they can. There is a deficit of year-round shelter beds for men in our area. We just don't have them. When the emergency shelter closes their doors at the end of March, usually at the end of March, until they open up again in May or June for their summer recovery program, there are a few more beds that become available, but really between April and October, we don't have sheltered beds for men. If you don't have children and you're a man, there are no shelter beds for you. So it's a hole. The Welcome House tried to fill it. They procured a building in Newport. I think they were misguided with the zoning requirements last year. We recommended funding for it. It never came off the ground, and I don't think it will. But that's the one area that we are lacking. That's one of the areas that we're really lacking in Northern Kentucky, is that piece. The wraparound services, yeah, Welcome House.
yeah.
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 I would venture to say that they probably do it even a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I mean, I think that let's see, so their request is or we're proposing $5,000. I think that's totally fine. I kind of feel like, you know, this is unsolicited advice, but I would love to tell them, like, you know, stay in your lane, you know, like Parish Kitchen, they always stayed in their lane. Like that woman that ran it, Molly Navin, she was always just like, look, I give a meal every day. That's what I do. I'm not going to fix everything else about these people. That's what I do. Other places pick up those pieces.
I agree. I think you have to understand when you're leading an organization what your capacity is, and I think that they've exceeded some of their capacity in some of that. For some of that,
Yeah.
I'll tell you that when we have conversations, we have not invited the emergency shelter to our task force yet, and we have not included them in the conversation when we created the plan for the unsheltered individuals. In assessing the different partners that are at the table, we value what can be brought to the table from other organizations more. And when Welcome House submitted a bid, they reached out to Emergency Shelter to see if they would continue to help and staff the hotel, similar to what they do at the Campbell County location during COVID. And they hemmed and hawed, and then they finally responded after the deadline. And then they responded with an amount that exceeded what was going to be possible to pay them. And then on top of that, their implication was they couldn't lower that because they didn't have any county funding to fall back on. But they never reached out to us and said, hey, if we help at Welcome House, can we bill you if we're doing the nights, can we bill you for those folks that are there at that night? And that's something that we could have had a conversation about. But it was really, this is another one of those organizations that I just don't think always is good as a good partner with other organizations in the community.
Yeah,
Not
I
always.
agree. I think it's starting to show.
Yeah.
You didn't hear that. Are we taped? Like, are we like, this is okay. Yeah.
Do you have a thought, Lana?
No, I was just agreeing
Okay.
with you all.
And Dee's shaking her head too. Okay, we'll move down. All right. Okay, Faith Community Pharmacy. Always has been a great organization to work with. They have a new executive director, Aaron Broomall, who came in December, and almost immediately was really concerned with the application. Of course, at that point, the application is due January 15th, so this was kind of his first big thing to do. it turns out that probably past administrations had been not correctly filling out our application and actually billing us using donated medications as an expense when they were creating their application. They were part of their expense. They were including donated medications. And so we had a lengthy conversations with him about how they can complete it, and trying to explain that even as they, for a worthy cause, want to expand their programs to the more rural counties, they can't be done at the expense of the fiscal courts. So you can't take all of your general dollars and say, we're going to support Grant, Pendleton, Gallatin County, Carroll County. You can't say you're gonna take all those general dollars, all those fundraising dollars, and support them and only use fiscal court dollars for Northern Kentucky. It's just not how that's going to work, especially because they were about 25% of their business. So it wasn't an insignificant portion. It's about a quarter of their business. So the reduction here is reflective of that. It's a reflection of accurately completing the application, which they were not happy about necessarily. They've been good partners still. I've gotten some mixed information from them as to what their demand has been since the closures for employment and things like that. I could see it continuing to increase if unemployment continues, but our recommendation, we feel like the program's operating well, but we don't want to give them more than what their financial need is. And we think that their financial need right now is $17,000. Questions? All right, Family Nurturing Center. So they have 4 programs that have been funded by the fiscal court that they're asking for funding again. Their child abuse treatment services, Kids on the Block, parenting education, and stewards of children. I kind of mentioned parenting education before. It was one of the higher quality programs that we really looked at over the last year or two. Kids on the Block is the in-school kind of puppeting program. I have to say, Jane Herms at Family Nurturing Center has always been very open and I think does a good job there. She endeared herself to Kirk when she came to him after the county took back over the funds and said, are we allowed to keep the 20% if we don't use it like we were allowed to do it before? Because that apparently was the policy under the ad, that if they used 80% of the funds, they could keep all of it. And he said no. They observed that they had misbilled us for Kids on the Block going back even to last fiscal year. The amount was not significant last fiscal year, and it was available. They had underbilled for a different program. And then for this fiscal year, they had done the same, and we worked out a policy to them. We didn't find that error, they did, and they came forward to us and said, we billed you more than we should have earlier in the year. It was a mistake within their system. Their child abuse treatment services program, there's another similar to Women's Crisis Center. We've had a lot of discussion with organizations who try to build, even though it's a similar service, when you're creating a unit, it doesn't work so well when you're trying to say that we're going to bill it. We do both individual and group services. So for child abuse treatment services, they want to do individual counseling, but also group counseling, which is fine. But if you're going to do that, for instance, with Catholic Charities years ago, we said, if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you're going to, you can bill if it's going to be one person, so you can bill for that. But if you have a group of 5, you can only bill 2/10 of the unit for that 1 hour. So dividing it evenly amongst the number of people who are there. So we've been working with them on pulling that apart and what that looks like. And Family Nurturing Center has just said they'll pull out, they'll just do the individual services because the difference is they don't do many groups, but they have been very helpful where they do some groups, have been in the schools. I don't know, Dee, if you heard much about the, oh my gosh, there was a large group of influx of immigrants from, it's escaped me.
Probably Somalia or.
No, it's an African country, but it was war torn and
Yes.
the rape crisis, the rape center of the world was oh gosh.
Yeah.
There was a sudden increase beginning in September of immigrants from this country with children in particular, and a lot of them had some aggression issues. And because they had been at, oh my gosh, do you remember, Dana?
I don't. I'm trying to think right
It
now.
says Syria. Is it? It's not Syria.
No, it's,
No.
I'll look it up in a minute. But because the kids had observed a lot, had either been victims of or observed a lot of violence, sexual crime in particular, they called in Family Nurturing Center, and the schools did a great job reaching out. It was R.A. Jones, I think, reaching out to the families and trying to build a community with them, but also bringing in Family Nurturing Center to provide services to those groups. And they actually got a counselor who could come in and do in their dialect, who could speak to them in their dialect, which was really impressive and can help promote some healing. So the program has been really very good. I think obviously their increase is it's a significant increase here. They just moved offices in Florence. They used to be on Ewing across from the Florence Government Center, and now they're back on Spiral Drive, kind of behind where Babies R Us and Guitar Center and all of them used to be. They're back there. So our recommendation is to keep the funding flat for Boone County. We are also, oh, sorry, wrong computer. This is my problem. If you look over, we do fund them at a much higher level than Kenton and Campbell. I think it's been good services. Really, we made the conscious effort a few years ago to recommend increased funding to them because they had a wait list and we had some funds available. So get our kids in and get them services. And they've done a good job with that. Our recommendation is to keep that flat, to keep the kids on the block at their about flat at their request. It's not too much different. The parenting education and the stewards of children. This is really a flat funding here. Any thoughts about this?
I agree with the numbers. That looks good to me. They're doing a great job, so why not keep up? You know, they're counting on our budget, you know, it's not like they've failed.
And Jane was also really kind of, after we made the allowances to let them do the alternate billing, they she said, you know, have you thought about this into fiscal year 21 at all? Because we anticipate that we'll have even reduced ability in the fiscal year. So she's really doing some forward thinking and like how she's trying to forecast what their 90, 180 day, 300 day budget's going to look like. So I'm sorry, Lana, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You didn't interrupt. No, I was just agreeing with you. Sorry. Head on.
Okay, you're good. So Family Promise, mentioned earlier, this is an organization that forgot to put their application in last year despite multiple reminders. Campbell County funded them still. We did not. I was able to meet. They have a new executive director. They lost basically. You'll remember Family Promise used to be Interfaith Hospitality Network. They use churches in the community to help provide sheltering services. David Roding was the longtime executive director. Then there was a series of other directors in there. And finally they closed kind of last minute, then reopened. And when they reopened, they hired a couple of staff and they worked there. I can tell you, I was worried about their burnout rate for the work that they were doing. They were very energized, and sure enough, there was some burnout that happened. And they've laid left, and they hired on new staff, a new director who's been there for about a year now. Our Campbell County worked with them in reconfiguring their application. So originally their request was much smaller than this, about $2,000. They were billing us per family versus per child, or per individual. So if you had a family of 7 versus a family of 2, you're not going to get reimbursed as much for the family of 7 versus the family of 2. So really they're going to do per person, which I think makes more sense based upon what their expenses are going to be. And so the request is for $7,000. We haven't funded them in a while. I think $5,000 would be a threshold that it's not so small that we're able to provide enough service, but not necessarily a full investment because we want to see how they're going to be operating. Questions? All right. Our other problem child, I'm joking about that. The other organization that forgot the funds, they're right back to back last year. They also forgot their application. So We haven't funded them this year, but they had a long time funded funded organization located in Campbell County. It's residential treatment for teen girls out there in California, Kentucky. Great view. All these residential homes again have a great views for the most part. And then the supervised visitation. Their supervised visitation is the only one on this side of the river. Our recommendation is a full full funding for that request. When the folks do get there, I think these are good programs. They've been a good program, a good organization. I did have some questions for them. One of the ways that we kind of check programs, and I won't a kind of janky way. Whenever you look at their application, one of the things I do is try to look at how many units per client they're going to do. Because one of the ways that they can bump this number up here is if they put more units. So it's when you're wondering, why does it take 122 units for a Boone County resident to make it through the residential treatment, but for the other counties, it's only 54. You're like, what's going on there? Ours is comparable. There's a wide range there. So I think there's a little bit of variability, but what it all comes down to is that if it's not going to be used, the rate's still the same. So if they don't use it, they don't use it. I also remind you that we instituted, and we plan to continue at least for this year, the ability to request up to a 20% increase if the program has expended 50% of the allocation by December 31st. So there's that kind of another blanket there, another opportunity there to safety net for organizations. Any questions about Holly Hill? We're getting there, I promise, guys.
Mhm.
Okay, Legal Aid of the Bluegrass. This is the homeless street outreach program we piloted last year, and they're going through this year. It has not operated, I think, to our expectations. They've really had some trouble partnering with organizations in Boone County, which we wouldn't have done this last year. By the end of fiscal year 19's funds, they hadn't used it until mostly June. And then they used almost all of the funds to help one family get the title back to the vehicle, but by the time that they'd been living in, but by the time they got the title back, the fees of the impound lot were so much that the person couldn't get the vehicle out of impound. So
My.
yeah, it's just not, they
No.
tried it. I think their efforts were in a good place, but I just don't think it's working well for them.
And I don't know very much about this organization, but like their only revenue or bank, like 2 banks. Is that right? I mean, am I reading this wrong?
For the program, I'm sorry.
It says the Bank of America and the PNC Charitable Trust.
Yeah,
Like
so I think for that program, that's all they're using. They don't do a whole, I will say that they don't do a whole lot of fundraising.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I don't see like any kind of other, there's no United Way. There's no, I don't really know,
They
Okay.
piloted this 2 years ago, and I just don't think it,
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like they're really doing a whole lot of anything,
I agree.
which I think there's a huge need for it, but I don't understand. It doesn't look, none of the numbers look like they're doing much of anything except paying their people a lot of money. Okay. That's all. I'm done.
no, I appreciate it. I think partially it's that they don't do a whole lot of fundraising. So just by the nature of the organization itself. So if
Right.
don't
So that's
get
what I'm
other-
trying to figure out. Like, where does the money come for the staff? Are they paid like privately and they just do this like a pro bono kind of thing? I don't really understand how.
No, they do. They have attorneys on staff and then administrative staff and things like that. They don't do a whole lot of pro bono. They may do some of it. Their older American stuff is much bigger. They have, I should have, if I thought about it, I would have brought their file. And I can share it with you, Dee, if you'd like.
I'm just curious.
A little bit better, but they have very specific parameters of what they can work on. Like they can't do anything around, and it's because the way that these legal aids were created across the country. It's by federal statute or whatever. And Lana may know more about this, but they can't work on things like I think gerrymandering or something like that is something, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but there were a couple of them that were very specific that they can't take work on, but they can work with older adults. They can work with victims of domestic violence. They can do housing and homeless, but it's very restrictive as to what else they can do because they're federally funded.
Okay.
It's a very interesting. That was I didn't realize how restricted they were until we monitored them. But
Okay.
I'll share it with you when I get to the office. Though it's pretty interesting. And
I was just curious because I mean, I can't imagine what a great need that, legal aid for especially homeless people is. And so it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, the numbers.
And I had wondered too, you think if there's something they can do with expungement or, to clear an eviction off a record, things like that, stuff that's going to prevent folks from getting
Jobs and reestablishing themselves. And yeah.
And so we're funding, we funded Welcome House's outreach project for the last 3 years. And, they're very sophisticated, but somehow they never connected really well with them. And they were using PIN Ministries, which is a volunteer group that goes to the library once a week. And so it was just a really odd, I don't know why they didn't access Welcome House and they chose to act. So if you all are comfortable with that we can make that recommendation.
Yep.
Good too, Lana. Okay. Mentoring or Mental Health America. My applications are out of order. So this is one of the other ones I was mixing kind of that support the individual and the peer or the groups, and they separated that out this year. They pulled the group piece aside, which I appreciate. The payee services, these are Welcome House also does this project. We look at this as kind of a prevention piece, preventing homelessness. For Mental Health America, those clients are all going to have some kind of mental health issue that they're working through, a diagnosis, and that helps to make sure that their rent's paid, that their bills are paid, etc. Actually, Dana used to do some payee when she worked at Welcome House. She came to before she came to us, she was with Welcome House's payee services, so she can tell you a little more about that program if you want. And then the peer support programs are kind of group programs that are working with it works with individuals who are recovering from mental illness or substance abuse, or sometimes both, and they work with folks who are who are new to the recovery process. So a lot of their services are held at what is called the PIER, the PIER in Newport, but they are doing more and more telehealth. And I work closely actually with the executive director of Mental Health America through a different group, and I can tell you that they've really exploded their telehealth since all of this has gone on. So more access to Boone County, I think, is coming. So our recommendation is to keep the funding there and to split up the peer support between the two. It's a slight increase over fiscal year 20. It'll be $1,000 more. Good.
Good.
Mentoring Plus, this is the same program that I think they do a fine job in Newport. They work with really critically at-risk kids, but all their services are in Newport, and I just don't feel like it's we've asked them to consider coming to Boone County so we can fund them, and it just didn't work with their design. So our recommendation is to not fund again. You good? Okay. All right. So New Day Ranch, equine therapy. This program has really gone very, very well. It's a smaller groups of kids, but the demand within the schools has been, I don't know if you've heard much. I think you talked about a little bit D last year, but it's been a really well-received program. And
Chelsea, actually, my daughter that shows horses and rides horses is volunteering out there too.
Oh, is she? Great.
Yeah, she is.
That's exciting.
Not now, but yeah, because they can't have anybody out there. But yeah, I mean, I love this program. I think that it could grow exponentially. Just hopefully it doesn't do it too fast. And that they get in over their head or something. But I think that they're on the right track, definitely.
I'm excited to see what this pole barn is. I've never seen a pole barn, so
Oh,
that
you've seen them, you just don't realize
maybe
it.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then what it looks like on the inside. She really has good use of volunteers. And Beth has been really good at that. So our recommendation is full funding of that request. I'm disappointed I was a little disappointed once they weren't able to use their funds for the van purchase, just that they hadn't done the due diligence of finding out what that insurance cost would be to transport Boone County students. But because I think
But that is expensive. Like, it's ridiculous to try to get that insurance. But also, as far as New Day goes, the Boone County Spring Horse Show is their big event of the year, which has been canceled. So they're not going to have that revenue either going forward, because they didn't even postpone it, which I was hoping they would. They just canceled it for the season, for the year. So
disappointing.
it is disappointing.
So 50,000 is okay then? Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm behind on my applications here. New Day Ranch. And alphabetize my applications. I'm gonna throw it off. The Children's Advocacy Center, this is a forensic interviewing program, and I want to pull up just again this utilization chart. We haven't looked at it in a while, but coming down here, one quick thing with the emergency shelter, you'll see how low their usage has been. Only 37% through March. I mean, they're not getting a lot of Boone County folks down there. New Day Ranch, and okay, sorry. So through March, they were only at 55%. They had some issues at the beginning of the year, and I think they worked through, once Lewis Kelly came into the Boone County Prosecutor's Office, they were able to get more referrals again, and they've built up that relationship again with Boone County Sheriff's Department to make sure they're getting the referrals in. But so because of that, I don't think that an increase is necessary. The program is still great. They've actually have been successful in getting some additional funding, and they've increased their staffing, and they've taken a lot of precautions to continue to provide services right now. Obviously, what you've probably been hearing is the fear is that referrals for child abuse are down, and that's not because it's not happening. In fact, it's probably happening more. It's just those mandated responders aren't putting their eyes on the kids because the schools aren't in session. So I think that it's a much needed service. It's a fantastic program, but I don't know that we need to do an increase at this time. I think keeping it, at that flat at 58 is probably a safe choice. Okay, I'll move on unless I hear anything else. Community Action Commission, this is their emergency assistance program. This is direct cash to individuals who have a cutoff or a disconnect notice or an eviction notice. Just a key to let you all in, make you aware of. As you know, I'm sure you know, evictions have been halted by the state. The courts are closed, so the evictions have been halted. That doesn't relieve people of paying their rent, however. So how these organizations are providing this, and then Duke is also not cutting off utilities. There is a fear that at the end of those cutoffs, those stoppages, that once evictions can happen and once cutoffs can happen, that there will be an onslaught of individuals who haven't been paying due to various reasons, potentially loss of job and income and things like that, that you might see an increase in that need over the next few months to a year. So I think funding at $22,000 is reasonable. With that being said, there have also been a lot of other influx of funds, the Horizon Fund, the CARES, or the Kentucky CARES money coming, the Kentucky CARES Team Kentucky Fund, are all being used to help support that stuff. So there's other support services there, but I think for our Boone County part, the 22,000 is our recommendation. That work? Okay. The Education Council resiliency poll screening. our recommendation is to keep it flat at this time. We have had more Boone County schools come in and use it, but our recommendation is keep it flat. And somehow Randy Poe is both the executive director over there, interim, and current still superintendent. So it's a lot of jobs.
I know, I can't believe they still haven't named a superintendent either, but that's a whole nother.
Oh, they haven't?
No, or they hadn't officially as of a few hours ago.
Came close.
It had, yeah, it should have, yeah.
Do they,
I wouldn't want
Deanna,
that
do-
job right now, but
do they know who it is
no.
unofficially? No.
I have not, I mean, I knew that they had narrowed it down to a few, but no, I haven't heard any inside scoop.
I'm sure it's hard right now too.
Oh
to
my
do this.
goodness. Could you imagine? There's no way I would want to be, that would be one of the jobs you couldn't pay me enough to have right now.
No, not right now.
No.
Mm-mm.
Figuring out next year in particular, no way.
I mean, I haven't seen any news or heard how, but I guess there's going to be protesting at the board this afternoon and
Oh,
because of all-
fantastic. Those poor people. My gosh.
I know, because of the graduation decisions that were made.
Oh,
Wow.
right.
Yeah, there's a big parent group that's trying to get protesters to go to the Board of Education this afternoon. And so I don't know if that happened or how it's going or anything about it, but. we'll see.
They have extra dates though, right? They have dates in June, July, and
No,
August, right?
That's why I was just talking to a good friend of mine that's a guidance counselor at Cooper. I talked to her a few hours ago and I asked her about the superintendent. And she said, no, there's been nothing yet. And then she said that I guess Boone, Kenton, and Campbell, all of the high schools now utilize BB&T Arena,
Mhm.
and they've closed it for the summer. So therefore, they had
Oh.
to all of their backup dates and everything. They just had to. They don't have a choice. There is nothing there now. They're not
Yeah.
allowing it. So therefore, there's no graduations except virtually now. So. But I mean, some of the Ohio schools are doing like the drive-in and things. So I think that there was a lot of options and, I mean, Boone County's so large. I think it's just overwhelming. And this was the best that they could all come up with cohesively, I guess.
That's hard.
It's so hard. Yeah. But, every school's doing things a little different, but doing something. Like, I feel like they're putting their own spin on it and doing the best that they can given the situation that we're all in.
Hmm.
So,
I didn't know that I didn't know BB&T had closed. I've heard all these backup dates and it's like, well,
right. That's what I asked her earlier. I said, but I had all these backup dates. And she said, yeah, but BB&T is the one who stepped in and said, we're closing for the summer, basically.
Mm,
So.
gosh.
keep thinking about them,
I know.
all those kids and their parents and
Yeah.
pulling down the health department. This program has gone exceedingly well. I think I shared with you all a thank you note that we received in the fall, in December, and we have the Boone County Youth Cabinet, which is for high school juniors. These kids have been on it, participated on it, and we hadn't been able to go to the local health department. Our day was in March, and it was like 2 weeks too late into March to get to go. So we got canceled, but we did a virtual event yesterday or on Tuesday. And even their public information officer, who I don't think really realizes that what we do, that we oversee these funds, she was saying that it's been such a great program for them to have, and that they've really appreciated the support from the fiscal courts to do it, and that all of the benefits that are there, the employment, which is really what we have been targeting, those employment opportunities that come from having teeth that are both functional and not a distraction, are really important. This is one area, and I haven't fully asked, and this has been, their work has obviously been closed because the dentists aren't working. They can't do, they're doing admin stuff in the back end, but they can't do the services right now. And it depends, I guess, what access would be like next year if we wanted to give a little bit more funds as far as the dental assistance, the direct dollars, that maybe we could take advantage of some time that they might have later in the fiscal year, and get some more services through. But I haven't cleared that with them yet. Maybe that's something we look at next year. But our recommendation is to keep the funding the same.
Good.
Good. Okay. The Regional Mental Health Court, this program, it's still doing pretty well. Actually, this was Dana's first monitoring that we had. Things are all out of order. It was, they're still doing very well. We kind of still have the preference that we're paying for something that maybe the DOJ should be paying for, because it's, really through the Department of Justice that's doing this. But I think that the work is good and it's a good program, but our current recommendation is to keep the funding flat, not to increase it beyond that. Any questions about the mental health court? People working cooperatively. This is a very small amount, a very nominal amount. This is another one whose executive director's salary sometimes makes you cringe, not as much as Chunks, but a little bit. I think that this is enough for them to be able to say, we get support from Boone County Fiscal Court and we can pair it with all these other programs, and they use it for home repairs. So our recommendation is to keep this flat again. With that. Okay, to RT Transportation. This is the jail transportation program. It's cab rides for inmates who have been released from the jail. It's a flat fee that we're reimbursing to them if they transport folks out. It's been going about the way it has been. Our current recommendation is to keep it flat. That they are a little bit underuse with that, but this is enough of a caveat that it won't make me. You'll remember probably 5 years ago, I had to go back before the fiscal court in February to say, we're running out of money in this program. Can we get into some more funds? So this will be enough to cover it, and I think it covers any overages too. Okay. All right, I'm gonna make you guys work on this one though. This is 1010.
I knew that was coming. We had such a big discussion about this last year, didn't we?
Yeah, the last 3 years.
Yeah. So you're saying so you're thinking no.
My assessment of the program has not changed.
Okay.
So I still don't recommend the funding. You'll recall 2 years ago, your recommendation was not to fund, and Kenton County came and 1010 came to the fiscal court, and the fiscal court gave them an allocation.
Mhm.
And then last year, the 1010's folks came and gave a presentation to you all, and you recommended a recommendation. So we can keep them flat. Certainly, we could increase them. You can give them nothing. My recommendation is to probably, looking at those numbers, is to not fund that bus pass or the drug testing assistance program. It's a little bit off. I did pull up their, hold on here, let me see. Yeah. This has kind of always been one of my points of contention, is their outcomes. And so it's a little convoluted, but if you can read through it, and this was accessible, there are 6, I thought this was a pretty unique way of looking at it, that of the classes that they provided, 7,000 classes that they gave were for people who actually completed the program, whereas only 988 were from people who did not complete the program. But so I guess the thought is that for most of what we're paying for, people are completing the program. But person-wise, and when you look at it, they charge us more for an assessment versus for classes, it's only a 33% completion rate, which, despite what they say that it's appropriate for this particular population, I don't know where they're getting that from. That's just their statement, I suppose. I will have to say that their outcomes have been better than Transition's outcomes, and that Transition has not provided outcomes in the past, and they are a much larger organization, and they should. But I don't know that the program is as successful as it has been. That being said, I understand where I am at, and even if we were to say that you want to fund it, and if we don't want to fund it, they could come back. County Fiscal Court could come back to the fiscal court meeting and say we think you should fund this as a partner. So it's up to you all. I'm not trying to be flippant about it either. That's not my intention.
No, I think that we've tried. Now I'm sort of like going to combine this with the next discussion of the transitions. So do we actually pay them $58,000 this year? Transitions?
Let me, you know what,
I think so, because I think that they like spent all of their funding, like they had spent it all by, it might have even been January or so.
So they got paid that and they didn't put in their application in time for this. So they fully understand they're going to be out 58K.
they didn't, not only did they miss the application for both Boone, Kenton, and Campbell, they also didn't do any mid-year increase requests. So like they could have put in additional fund requests for those programs and didn't do that.
Interesting.
I think it was a mistake on their end. I can tell you that they received multiple emails from myself and from Campbell County regarding the application being available, along with the fact that it's traditionally, the due date didn't change. It's every year.
Right,
January
and
15th.
it's what they've always done.
But that's an
Interesting.
excellent point, that if without funding transitions, if you don't fund 1010, then there isn't any substance use treatment that's going to be funded with these mental health dollars. So that's a good point to consider when we're making recommendation for
And there's
1010.
no other programs out there, Laura, that, I mean, there's nothing we met, that we didn't talk about or miss or.
Yeah, could any of these other ones fall? I know everything probably has a hand with drug stuff, because,
Right.
mental health, all that kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of how I was looking at it too, was to Deanna's point that, then we won't be saying we're working on it. And I don't know if the fiscal court would be happy about that. I don't know what they'll say.
And so I can tell you that none of them are strictly substance abuse treatment. Now, of course, mental health court, there are going to be some folks that are dual diagnosis. There's peer support for Mental Health America and then there are, the farther out pieces, the parenting education probably have components of folks who have substance use in their backgrounds as to why they may have been referred to the system. So I think for just that instance, I mean, we could do a recommendation of, wouldn't say that we would increase it above their request, but you could still do 4,000 here and a 7,000 here, and that'd be something.
Yeah, like maybe we just throw a bone, just something to say so that we are, I feel bad. I don't know what happened with transitions. That seems really strange, but maybe we just fund a little on the assessment and some on the drug education program, just so that we're doing something towards that in the county.
Okay. Do you guys, Lana and Deidre, do you agree?
Yeah.
Would 4,000 be okay? And then
Sure.
you want to keep them at 7,000 here?
Whatever you
Sure.
think is fine, yeah.
Yeah, whatever you think. I mean, it's not our fault that transitions did not put it in, and lucky for 1010 that they didn't, because we probably wouldn't be funding them otherwise,
Right.
truth be told.
And they know, and they were made aware of the fact that we weren't, there was some question as to whether or not the other counties were, and Campbell County firmly decided against it. And then I think Kenton also did decide against transitions. So.
Gotcha.
But then where they put it, I mean, does Kenton and Campbell have better options for where they're putting money as far as drug assessment and things go? I mean.
No, I can tell you, I think that when you're talking about substance use treatment, it's really limited. The other players, there are a handful of other players, and the biggest one would be St. Elizabeth Journeys, and then Sun Behavioral Health,
Right.
Are probably the two biggest ones. And Dana, do you know any of the smaller ones that would be out there?
I mean, that's pretty much it, honestly. I was thinking about it. We don't have a ton, so.
The other two would be Brighton Recovery Center and then Transitions Grateful Life Center, but those are all funded. That all funding comes through their community block grants and then the DOC funding that they get for some of those people. So they don't traditionally apply for our funds. So there are, again, a handful of smaller substance abuse treatment, but these are, I mean, this is mostly, there are a couple additional ones I can't remember off the top of my head, but what we've looked at is that they ask us for the funds. So if the impression is if they're not asking, if the other organizations aren't applying for it, then they must be meeting those needs without our funding.
Yeah, right.
It's
So I
just
think that with
hard.
our 11,000 there, maybe that works.
I mean, it's hard for me as a taxpayer in Boone County and the drug problem that's so enormous to think that there's not something, that there's not like some great organization saying, give us money so we can help people.
And I don't think Transition's intent was to say that they didn't need money. I think it was just an error in their administration. And my guess is maybe I don't know what's going on with them, but the fact that they missed 2 opportunities for additional funding, I hope their board says what's going on.
Yeah.
And makes some changes or makes some notes of that. So so Transitions built that big facility. They took over the facility down there at Pleasure Isle. And when they did that, it's a strange understanding, trying to understand what the bed availability is anywhere. And their comments have been, the last time I saw them, actually it was a mental health court board meeting, I saw them there, the woman who runs the center at Pleasure Isle, that they are at capacity, but they have beds available. So
how's that work? Huh. That's like saying I'm a hotel, I'm sold out, but I can get you a room. That's
Yeah.
a little odd. I don't, somebody's gonna need to explain that.
it's some funny like math, like you just get kind of like I don't know, like.
Yeah. Do they hold beds aside? Like I remember that the Catholic Children's Home, there were groups that would pay to always have like 2 beds available in residential treatment, no matter what, so that if they had a crisis in the middle of the night, somebody could come in and one of their people could be referred there, and they were paid to hold the bed. I don't know. I mean, if it was empty, then that would mean that they could essentially double book it.
Yeah, that's true, right?
Right.
I don't think that's the case. My guess is that, and there's been a shortage of substance use and mental health providers in our area. So my sense is even for Sun Behavioral Health, I don't think that they're at their capacity either, because they don't have the staff to fully staff the facility. So I don't know if Transitions does that piece of it. I have heard of other programs, and the mental health court has paid the emergency shelter for 2 or 3 beds traditionally to hold that for their clients. So that does happen in different cases. I know North Key, I know Boone County Schools used to pay North Key to hold 2 of their beds when they had the inpatient center for kids before Sun took that over. So yeah, that does happen, but I don't think so.
Huh, interesting.
It was a weird comment. Okay, so 11,000 then for, I will tell you this, and I don't know if it sways you one way or the other, that we do allow organizations to transfer funds between programs if they have more than one funded, but if it's not funded, they can't make that transfer payment. I don't want to dissuade you from that, but we wouldn't be paying for drug testing, and I'm okay with that, but I want to let you know that they wouldn't be able to transfer any funds to drug testing if we keep it at this. Does that work for you all?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we talked about Transitions. Okay, Welcome House. We're last 2 organizations. We're almost there, guys. Welcome House has the 4 programs here that they've asked for funding for. You'll remember, and you might see on your application some information about the, hold on, let me pull up their application. I need to get through all the stuff I have for 1010 here. We set aside funds, about 25,000 for their men's sheltering program this year, but that never opened up, so that fund was unused. They applied for a new program this year, their case management. Actually, one of the things that Dana used to do, she came from Welcome House, used to do there. The funding for their emergency shelter, their homeless street outreach, and their payee services. This is one, I'm talking about organizations who didn't include any additional funding within their streams. Let me pull up their application real quick, because this was one of the ones we were down to the last minute having discussions with them about the programs. Welcome House, I want to continue to say that they have been a great partner with us. I think that the outreach program has gone very well. They've really participated in all of our Boone County Homeless Task Force, and they're doing a fantastic job at the hotel. Their executive director's leadership has really won over, our Boone County folks, even the city of Florence, to some extent. And I can see them playing a major role in our future work in this world. So they're doing a great job. But one of my problems when looking at their application, again, they didn't include any private funding or grant funding until we finally got them to go back and add a little bit. You might have heard that they got a large grant from the Amazon Foundation end of last year. It's $1 million over 5 years, and it's specific as to what they can use that for, but some of that wasn't included, so kind of went back through that. We talked to them pretty extensively about their outreach program. I think we were great partners with them in fully funding that outreach program the first 3 years, but maybe it's something we want to look at. Are we still getting our bangs for it? I do think that they're doing a good work out here, but I don't know if we're getting much more than what they're doing in Kenton and Campbell. And they're putting less into that project. So I'm going to pull the other one back up. The summary here. So, the current recommendation that we have, their emergency shelter, again, is going really well. They're doing some hoteling for families. Actually, they're using some of that, the Amazon Foundation, the Jeff Bezos fund for paying for hotels for some families, especially through this crisis, where they work to get them services. We recommend keeping the funding flat at the $24,000. They're also in talks with the city of Covington, where they used to own the building that their emergency shelter is in and rented the space on the first floor of the parish kitchen. About 4 or 5 years ago, that switched, and they sold the building to Catholic Charities, to Parish Kitchen, and then they were renting their space, and they have a very long lease in that space. That building is one of the last buildings that's standing over there as they continue to do the Duveneck Square development. And the developer and the city of Covington have a lot of interest in moving that building out. Carolyn, you probably know that Parish Kitchen's already got a new space just down on Madison, a little bit further. But I think wisely, Danny's been very good. Danny Amarine is the executive director, and she's been very good at creating relationships and building that relationship with the city of Covington, with every government official that they can, while still advocating for her organization, for her business. And they're being very cautious about how they move and what they agree to. They want to make sure that they have full agreement to move their shelter and to still have a shelter in the city of Covington. And so they're doing a good job with that. The homeless street outreach, I think reducing that a little bit would be okay. This is not a terribly large reduction, but it would be a smaller reduction. It would just be kind of a signal to say, we're pulling back a little bit from this funding, using that extra funding that you have coming in to do this. It's a good program. It's not quite operating the same as it was when we originally funded it. At that time, it was a nurse practitioner. It was going to be mental health access, telehealth at that point. They were going to have somebody from North Key. So it's not quite all the same. They got funding from Impact 100 to purchase an RV that's outfitted to provide medical services on site. There are some issues though, because they lost their nurse practitioner, and so they have an RN, but she can't quite do as much without having standing orders from somebody. So it's kind of they're curtailed what they can do a little bit. And then their payee services, again, still it's a good program. They've expanded that program, actually offering some of it down in Lexington now. But it's kind of a prevention type program. So our recommendation this time is to not expand into the case management funding. I think that we're funding this organization at a large scale, and to not increase it at this time, and to maybe decrease that homeless outreach a little bit. But I'm willing to hear any of your thoughts before we move forward.
That makes sense to me.
Still some water on that. So you guys are good with that, Lana and Dee? Okay. Okay, the last one, Women's Crisis Center. So the counseling and intervention services and their emergency shelter, the reduction here is, you can see it's largely a result of their, the way they completed the application. Their finance director went through and did a little bit more of a thorough review of it. And so it's resulted in a reduction in the ask. Excuse me. So their current funding level is at 50,000. Excuse me, but the unit rate will be reduced to the 20,000. This is also a piece of that doing individual versus group services. Their emergency shelter services is also changed. Again, this is a service that if it's used or it's not, so this would be an increase, but total between the programs, it would still be less than last year. The big one here for me is the recommendation to not fund Green Dot. We've tried to do this a couple of years. They've really had difficulty getting into Boone County schools. It just seems like they don't have a way in. And so we wind up funding some goofy things like we fund a student who goes to Notre Dame but lives in Boone County for some stuff. They billed us for things like the Women's March, that they had somebody that went to the Women's March and billed us for that. And it's a kit. So, the program seems like it's a quality program, but it's not been able to be implemented in schools. And so our recommendation is to not fund that. So this is a big cut to that organization. But when you look at it, it's what their ask is for the first two programs. It's just nothing for that last one. You good with that?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at this, and this number is off because I'm missing two organizations. I'm missing Children's Home and Campbell County Skills U here. But still, this is a large portion of that. And it is a slight reduction over the current fiscal year, about $46,000. But you know where that is. That's transitions, right? Most of it. So I think this is probably a really quality recommendation if you guys are okay with this. And if you want to go back and talk about anything in particular, I'm happy to do it.
No, I think it's good.
Lana's good to you? And Dee, you're good?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Great. Well, next step here is then I will take this to the fiscal court. It'll be taken to the fiscal court on June 9th. It's a morning meeting and for the final recommendation. I don't anticipate that we'll have any issues. I don't think that anything here is really going to cause much problems within our community. I think a lot of these organizations will be very happy with these funds, these continued funds, the stability when a lot of their other services their funds may be cut. So I think they'll appreciate that piece of it. So, any other questions? No?
Very organized as always.
Well, thank you. It's different, right? This is different.
Our new normal, right?
Yeah. Hopefully by next year we can be in person. A small group at least.
Yes.
We could do it. I know there was a possibility of doing it in person, but I thought be cautious and not do it in person, even though we're only 5 of us. So.
Right. We're 10 or less. We'll be good.
Well, thank you all. I hope you have a good rest of your spring and everybody stays healthy and sane. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
You too. Take care and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.